Welcome to the Mio on MMA podcast. I am your host, Mio, and we are here to break down UFC 284, plus whatever is going on around UFC 284. For example, let's talk real quick here about the lack of promotion this card received. Until this week, basically, the UFC was doing very, very little promotion to the point where one of the main eventers, Islam Makhachev, actually took to social media to complain about it. Social media as a whole has complained about it as well, the MMA social media. And of course, the inevitable comparisons to how much you're promoting UFC 284 as opposed to how much that they are promoting Dana White's Power Slap has to be brought up. Now, I will defend the UFC for a hot second here. This is a fight card that kind of does promote itself. You do have, on paper, the top 2 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. Now, I don't believe that they should be the 2 top pound-for-pound fighters in the world. I do actually believe Volkanovski should be. I don't believe Makhachev should be. Because Makhachev, realistically speaking, in terms of the absolute elite, the absolute top, the GOAT conversation, the pound-for-pound conversation, is a very recent addition to this. Really, it's just him beating Charles Oliveira that has him in the pound-for-pound conversation. And the fact that he is the champion in either the first or second deepest division in all of MMA. This is not an anti-Makhachev moment here. We'll talk about the fight in a second. But it is definitely, it's marketing. It's marketing to promote him this high. And they're hoping that will do the legwork. That's simply putting the 2 top pound-for-pound guys, according to their website, according to their rankings together, will on its own promote itself. And to a degree, they are right. Because no amount of non-promotion for this fight is going to keep hardcore fans from talking about it, from dissecting it, from asking for takes. I think I made this pick 3 months ago, honestly. That's the level of interest that there is. But, I do have to bring this up, and I always have to bring this up. The UFC is the promoter. If you're not promoting the fight, then what are you doing? What justifies your 50% revenue from the fight share? Because those are, kind of unaware. UFC revenue is 20% fighter, 30% operational costs, 50% shareholder, servicing debt, for example, dividends, etc. It's not all profit, but it is essentially in that equity category, to use a financial term. So you're getting the lion's share of this. You're getting half of it. And you're complaining about, Dana White has the audacity to complain about how Makhachev is not doing enough promotion for the fight. That the fighters are not. Fighters are there to put the fight on. You're supposed to be promoting it. A little bit of Bellator news. Apparently they're going to do MVP versus Goto Yamamuchi. Damn it! Come on. There were so many good ideas. My Lorenz Larkin versus MVP idea. Come on, guys. I just put that in the podcast yesterday, and already my balloon has been popped. I'm not happy with that. I'm not happy with that at all. For this fight itself, or for this fight card itself, it's not a deep card. We are talking about a 3-fight card, realistically. You've got the Makhachev-Volkanovski fight, fantastic. You've got the intern Featherweight championship bout, that's pretty cool. You've got Randy Brown versus Jack Della Maddalena, that's very cool. But the rest of the pay-per-view, not amazing. The undercard is not bad. I'm looking forward to Bagdasarian versus Kulabau. Clayton Rodriguez is on the card, I like him. Luma Luke Bume and Lisa Reed is a low-key banger. And of course, in fairness, they did want Robert Whittaker, Paulo Costa on this card. That would have elevated this card a fair bit. They did want some cards that also would have made a lot of sense. Kai Kara-France and Alex Perez was targeted for this card. Jamie Malarkey versus Nasrat Kakbarast, which I would have been a very big fan of, was targeted for this card. Joel Alvarez versus Zubair Tukhugov is not an amazing fight by any means, but it is better than what we're getting for Tukhugov. There's a lot of weirdness around that Tukhugov fight, and we'll talk about it towards the end because it's the first fight of the card. Therefore, I will be getting to it last. But And there's nothing wrong with that because, I mean, obviously the main event is probably worth the price of admission. I'm not going to sit here and say, I'm not excited for this card. I'm not going to buy this card, etc., 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 because the main event is that damn good. But given that the UFC has always been anti-boxing's one-fight cards and wants a card that goes top to bottom to be actually worth your time, this is not it. Even in its original best case, no injuries, everything went right way. Well, okay, no. If everything went right, I'm thinking about it now because you got the 3 fights that are actually really good on the main card now. Add Costa versus Whitaker. Add Perez versus Kaikara France. You probably do actually have a really good pay-per-view card at that point. But the fact that the undercard didn't have anything really to resurrect better to add to the main card than Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Metafield, and particularly Justin Tafa versus his third different opponent in the form of Parker Porter, is pretty poor. But anyways, let's get to the fights. Let's start talking about the fun here. As I have a PM? Nope. Okay. Nothing I need to respond to right this second. There's a couple underdogs that are live on this card too, if you're thinking about betting. I'm not going to bet on this one. I bet on the last card because it was my birthday and I just kind of like decided someone did give me some money and told me to go use it for betting. So that was cool. But this is a card that actually has a lot because, I mean, you have live dogs in both the main and the co-main and the third fight on the card. And really all the way through the main card, you have live dog odds. And even further down, Modestas Bukauskas is a live dog, in my opinion. Don Sheamus is a live dog. Elise Reed is a reasonably live dog. And further down, you got Blake Builder, I believe is how you say his name. Also pretty live dog. So there's a lot of potentially decent betting to be had here. So I guess that's interesting. If you're a big gambler, a big degenerate, you can take a lot from this card. Main event: Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski. Makhachev coming in at a -350 to -410 favorite. Volkanovski coming in at +285 to +320. Let me get something out of the way right now. There is a lot of talk on social media about what winning this fight does for the GOAT status, the pound-for-pound status of Islam Makhachev, and how it would make him the greatest fighter ever, at the absolute end of the hyperbole, but also like number 1 pound for pound and so on. That, to me, doesn't really make a lot of sense. Because you have Volkanovski coming up a weight class. He is the guy with everything to win here in terms of legacy. Because, let's be honest here, when we were talking about Anderson Silva GSP coming up, you didn't really talk about Anderson Silva getting much off of beating a welterweight. You didn't talk about John Jones getting something off of beating Anderson Silva. You didn't talk about the various lightweights that Jose Aldo was supposed to fight, getting something big off of fighting Jose Aldo, which I guess that would be the direct comparison. Or Eddie Alvarez beating Conor McGregor when it was champion versus champion. So that to me is a little bit ridiculous. So let's throw that to a side right now, and we'll talk about the fight here. Islam Makhachev is 4 inches taller. Interestingly enough, Volkanovski actually has a 1 inch longer reach. That's pretty interesting. So that means that for all the talk about height defining this fight, and there's been a lot of it. I mean, that's basically been Makhachev's big trash talk line is, you're short. The irony is that there's not really much of a effective range advantage for Makhachev. Now, like, there is, because having a 1 inch longer reach, but being 4 inches shorter, there is fight mechanics there that is going to give Makhachev a longer range of engagement, but it's not huge. Additionally, I don't even really get why we're talking about the height and the reach so much in the social media, because Makhachev is not a good striker. For an elite fighter, Makhachev is not a great striker. If this turns into a predominant kickboxing match, a very much striking affair, Volkanovski will have a number of technical edges that overwrite the whole reach thing. I mean, Max Holloway's reach was not a problem. Well, it was a problem, but it was a problem that Volkanovski solved. And he was a fighter that fights taller, longer than Islam, and is a far more gifted striker. So I don't think that that's really something we need to consider about, because the question here is really the wrestling. Can Islam Makhachev take down Alexander Volkanovski? And if not completely lock him down, because I don't think he'll completely lock him down, but if he can get enough top control time to do damage, to set up submissions potentially, get the finish, or ride out a decision, that is the question. That is really what this fight comes down to. And it's kind of hard to say how it is, because we haven't seen Volkanovski face a dedicated wrestling threat, a dedicated takedown threat since 2018 when he fought Chad Mendes. It's been 5 years. That's a lot of time. And we never got the answer to the question that, all right, so Volkanovski in the Mendes fight did show vulnerability. He got taken down, I forget if it was 2 or 3 times. He actually even got it clipped with a power shot during a wrestling exchange. Like, there was a lot of things that Makhachev theoretically could build on there. But we haven't seen, like, okay, but what did that do for Volkanovski? Did he start to really, 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 really break things down and get better at counter wrestling? Because he was a good intuitive scrambler. He was able to get out from underneath Mendes without any particular problems. So the fact that, yeah, sure, Ortega took him down, put him in some very dangerous positions, doesn't really tell us much. But the problem is I also have to go with Makhachev is a bigger guy. He is a fantastic wrestler. He is not Khabib. I feel like I have to say that every single time. And the reason I have to say that is because Makhachev and Khabib are conflated to such a degree because Khabib is his coach, and to a very casual, surface level explanation, they're very much the same fighter. But Khabib had more of the physical elements that made his game work than Makhachev does. And I actually think Makhachev is actually the better pure technical artist when it comes to takedowns. I think it takes him less time and less chain wrestling, despite having less physicality to get them. What I'm saying is I believe Makhachev will be able to take Volkanovski down. I believe that Volkanovski will be able to survive. He will be able to make him work. He will be able to do some scrambling. But we have seen him controlled for moments by smaller and honestly less accomplished MMA wrestlers. It largely, to me, I just see him getting taken down a bunch. And he doesn't have big fight-ending power. Volkanovski's career has been defined by not necessarily having the biggest fight-ending, the biggest dynamic fight-ending power. Like, if we look at it, went to decision with Max Holloway, took to the 4th round to finish Chan Sung Jung, went to decision with Brian Ortega despite beating him quite badly, went to decision with Holloway twice more, went to decision with an old Aldo, went to decision with Darren Elkins back in 2018. And even Shane Young in 2017. We're going to talk about Shane Young later. His finishes in the UFC are Yusuke Kasuya, who is not a good fighter. Just throwing that out there. And then like Jeremy Kennedy, who's not the most durable guy. And then like Chad Mendes, which was mostly because he got tired. Chan Sung Jung. So like his ability to finish a fight is not super high. So even though I believe him to be a far better striker than Makhachev, he doesn't have the ability to like hurt him in an instant. And Makhachev should keep coming forward, keep getting the wrestling game applied, keep getting the takedowns, and eventually probably, I do honestly think he'll finish him. I mean, he did submit Charles Oliveira, and I could see him pounding him out here or getting a rear naked choke against Volkanovski. It's still a fascinating fight, and if Volkanovski wins, I'm going to be so happy. I'm gonna be so happy to be wrong because I do find the Makhachev fan base, and again, this is again one of those cases where like I have no issue with the fighter. I honestly don't have an issue with Makhachev beyond the regional association with Kadyrov and the Russians. Like that is my only. That is the only thing. Like that he is a willing or not propaganda piece for that area of the world is a little bit annoying. But like as a person, I don't have any kind of like negative feel for him. Even like less so than Khabib. It's just his fan base watching him lose this fight will probably lose their shit. And I'm here for it. And Volkanovski is one of my favorite fighters. He's super, super awesome dude. He's on my like top 10 list of guys I would just love to hang around with. Go grab a steak at a steakhouse or something. Get a good meal with him and talk MMA and rugby, and we would have a great time. I have that faith. But Makhachev, too big, too strong, too good of a wrestler. Okay. Yair Rodriguez versus Josh Emmett. Emmett 5 inches taller, 1 inch longer. He will have the reach here. Emmett also doesn't really throw straight punches as much as he probably should. Doesn't maximize his reach. Emmett is an uninteresting fighter in the sense that nothing he does is particularly amazing. He is very much the prototype wrestle boxer. He likes to box. He'll throw the occasional kick, but he likes to throw heavy punches, and it's well put together. He'll throw in combination. He'll throw with different speeds. He'll change things up, and he can wrestle. The irony is that he actually has not wrestled much in a while. Honestly, like the wrestling has honestly kind of gone away since like. Hang on, let me quickly pull up UFC stats here because I want to say it has been a really long time since Josh Emmett really committed to his wrestling game, and you would think that would be something he would want to bring in here. So let's see your takedown numbers. Yeah, we're talking like the Scott Holtzman fight where he hit 8 takedowns. Aside from that, he really does not have much. Now, mind you, this is UFC stats, which I personally find is wrong periodically, but it can't be that wrong if you catch my drift. I don't know. Like, and I'm not a huge believer in Yair Rodriguez. I never have been. Like, watching him get pretty much dunked on by Frankie Edgar and also get taken down pretty easily by Max Holloway is a massive concern. And I think that a lot of the time his striking is more the complete opposite of Emmett's. Emmett's is function over flash. Rodriguez, Yair, is very much flash over function. He'll throw creative stuff, flashy stuff, dynamic stuff, and it can hit really hard. Really, 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 really hard. It can produce highlight reel knockouts. It produces moments that do get people excited. But it also, I think, presents opportunities to drag him into deeper water, take advantage of the fact that he doesn't really have a constructed, nuanced game. But I am going to pick Rodriguez because the problem I see is that Emmett, number one, is getting old for the weight class. This is featherweight. This is a division where you get old quite quickly. He's 37. He has been cracked on a durability level before. He probably, honestly, if some of his recent opponents, notably Calvin Kattar, had just turned the whip cup on him late in fights and got and really pursued a volume edge to a finish, maybe even like a Shane Burgos, probably could have got it done. And Rodriguez is a lot more creative, confident, has the ballsiness of youth, I guess, that sort of reckless abandon that, like, he is the type of guy that isn't going to lose a close decision to Emmett. He is the type of guy that is either going to get finished by Emmett or absolutely dominated, I guess would be the other option. Or he's going to do stuff that stamps his authority on the fight. And I am going to take Yair Rodriguez here. He is the favorite, minus 175 to minus 196. Emmett plus 143 to 163. There's value in Emmett as an underdog. But I am going to pick Yair by TKO. But honestly, if Josh Emmett comes out here and realistically goes out here and does the alpha male thing, the team alpha male thing, prioritizes the wrestling, prioritizes the scrambling, prioritizes the tools that honestly were the base to his game once upon a time, it's a very winnable fight. It's just I haven't seen him do that in a long, long time. Randy Brown versus Jack Della Maddalena. Randy Brown is 4 inches taller, 5 inches longer. That's a big concern. Obviously, that's a massive range advantage in a fight between two guys that are predominantly strikers. Like, Randy Brown can grapple, has actually shown pretty good grappling chops. Jack Della Maddalena can grapple as well, has shown, that capability. But both of these guys, at the end of the day, want to exchange in a kickboxing affair. So that reach is pretty big. And Jack Della Maddalena is used to being able to attack from the outside. It's going to be hard for him to do that. But Randy Brown is the type of fighter that really should be way better than he is. If you look at Randy Brown's frame, which I just talked about, you look at his athleticism, he should be exceptionally good. Yet he's a guy who had a nip-tuck fight with Chaos Williams, had a nip-tuck fight with Francisco Trinaldo, had a nip-tuck fight with Jared Gooden, lost to Vicente Luque, which, no shame there, but Vicente Luque, probably the closest to Jack Della Maddalena he's fought. Getting knocked out from bottom by Nico Price would be another example of that. All of this is to say is that I don't trust him to fight to a structured game plan really ever. He's a guy who feels like he has to have an adventurous fight that lets a type of fight be pushed on him a lot, and who also is very much a defense is my reach, but my reach is really just insulation type of guy. His body is very open, very, very open to getting smashed. And Jack Della Maddalena is actually really, really good at working the body. Dude has some amazing rib roasters. The guy will punish you. And there's a lot of body to punish on Brown. There's a lot of openings to punish on Brown. And I think he can do that. Now, I will say this, because a lot of the time I say that there are fighters who I would like to pick, and then I bring up the idea that I kind of need to see them do something of this level to pick them. And there's a little bit of that with Jack Della Maddalena, because he has not fought anyone near Randy Brown's caliber. His UFC run has consisted of guys who are not ready, Ange Lucha and Pete Rodriguez, not UFC caliber, Ramazan Emeev, who is just kind of a takedown and control guy, and Danny Roberts, who has just faded out of being, UFC level. He's a 35-year-old who relied on speed and didn't have great durability to begin with. That was a loss to father time more than anything else. But Della Maddalena is very good. There's a lot of creativity to him. He gives you different looks. Like I said, I'm a sucker for good body work, and he has it. He's defensively sound. Randy Brown hasn't really impressed me with a sudden dynamic finish in a long time. If ever. I'm actually kind of struggling to even think of one. So I am going to take Jack Della Maddalena. I am going to take him to find a TKO. I am going to take him to punish the body. I am going to take him to, use that body punishment to go upstairs and get the job done. And he's a minus 300 to minus 350 favorite. So I'm clearly not very alone. Plus 250 to plus 270 on Randy Brown. I do think that's a little bit wide. Again, Della Maddalena has not fought someone this good. But I think all the signs are there that he will pass this test and move into that consistent ranking department where this guy is one of the 15 best welterweights in the world and on a path to a possible title shot in the future. He is that kind of prospect. All right, now to the sad fight. Justin Tafa and Parker Porter. So for one, Parker Porter, big ups for taking this fight on it, being the third choice here, because this was supposed to be Austin Lane versus Justin Tafa. And then Waldo, I'm blanking on his name. The baseball guy. He beat Jared Vanderaa. Cortez Acosta. There you go. Waldo Cortez Acosta. They were both booked in this fight, and then, Porter stepped up. And also, you know what? Credit to Justin Tafa for taking a third different opponent. Like, that's also very cool. They're the same height. Porter is an inch taller. Or not an inch taller, inch longer, pardon me. Presumably, Porter will be able to make the weight without any real issue. This is heavyweight after all. This is the division where, like, a late notice replacement should probably be the most possible. I'd actually be more worried about Tafa, who, of course, missed weight and actually fought super heavyweight and scored the first super heavyweight knockout in UFC history when he beat Harry Hunsucker. There you go. I'm not a big fan of either guy. In terms of what I think they can do in the UFC, I want to make that clear, because I don't have any problems with their personalities. I actually rather like Parker Porter, a guy who is just kind of physically limited. He's like doing it all for the fat guys out there. Super tough. Has put together a good pressure boxing game with some wrestling to it that, generally speaking, allows him to beat regional level heavyweights without really much of an issue. And has allowed him to actually put together a pretty good UFC run that I didn't honestly expect, if we're being honest. Also did get him finishing against Chris Daukaus, though. And Tafa is probably the most similar to Daukaus of his former opponents, because the guys he beat, Chase Sherman, Alan Badeau, Josh Parisian, they're heavyweights, so they're heavy hitters in their own right, but, like, I don't think that they're really at the same level Tafa. Like, I think Tafa is got a lot more oomph to his punches. Not necessarily that they are worse fighters, because we'll get into Tafa in a second. But I like seeing Porter succeed, but you're taking late notice replacement in Australia. You're fighting the hometown kid. You're not super athletic. You have been knocked out before. It's risky, but I also can't bring myself to pick Justin Tafa despite being the hometown guy, because he's just not good at anything. He kind of has a little bit of an opposite problem to Parker Porter, in the sense that Porter is a physically limited fighter who does the absolute maximum of what he's got. Tafa, I don't actually feel is all that physically limited. I think he hits hard. I think he's reasonably fast, reasonably explosive. He is durable. And that should actually lead to probably being better than he is, but I'm sorry, beating Harry Hunsucker and beating I can't even remember who else he's beaten. That's how nondescript Justin Tafa. And admittedly, I also want to say this. Justin Tafa is on the 9th fight of his career. So I feel for the guy just in that regard. That, like, he's a guy the UFC picked up at 3-0 and had lose to Jorgen De Castro, Carlos Felipe, Jared Vanderaa, beat Juan Adams, beat Harry Hunsucker. He's just probably not, doesn't have the seasoning, probably should just be on the Aussie regional scene still. And I can't help but look at the fight that he had with Jared Vanderaa, where Vanderaa was able to more or less define the fight on him. and think that's a winnable strategy for Parker Porter. He's probably actually better at it. So I'm taking Parker Porter by decision, but I don't know, a knockout by Tafa, it's an option. It's got possibilities. And the betting odds at Parker Porter is a plus 100 to plus 105 underdog. I don't think that's wrong in any way. Tafa minus 125 to minus 128. By the way, that's got to be the tightest line I've ever seen. You have a 0.003 gap from lowest to highest on the betting odds. That is tight. That is really, really tight, is what I'm getting at. Okay. Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menafield, 205 action. Crute is the 2 inches taller fighter, but Menafield is one of those incredibly broad-shouldered individuals who actually has 2 inches of reach on Jimmy Crute. Two guys at very, very different points. Jimmy Crute is a guy that I trust to have a game, to have grit, to have determination, to do his thing, but has lost 2 in a row. He got absolutely nuked by Jamal Hill, and he did get his leg screwed up by Anthony Smith. Menafield is like the complete opposite. He's a dude who has every physical ability I can think of to be a great 205er, but I don't think he has the mental fortitude. He's talked about how he has to get super mad at people in order to fight them. It feels kind of like he's a bit of a Uriah Hall in that regard, where I've said a number of times about Uriah Hall, the thing that held Uriah Hall back was not technical, was not physical. It was the fact that he was just not built mentally as a fighter, that hurting people hurt him, essentially. Menafield gives off like that same kind of vibe. He has to villainize and make the other guy such a villain in his mind that he can go out there and destroy, like he did against Askar Mozarov, who's just really, really bad, and Misha Serkidov, who's just really, really washed. So there's some hype on Menafield right now. I just don't really think that it actually carries through. That being said, Crute has not looked all that durable lately, and Menafield does hit exceptionally hard. So despite the fact that I think Crute is kind of better in every way, that he can implement some of what Ed Herman did before his leg got messed up, that some of what Devin Clark was able to do against Menafield, where clearly a physically overmatched fighter was able to just fight harder, show more grit and determination, be a natural fighter to a greater extent. And I'm saying this all like Jimmy Crute is not a great physical specimen. He absolutely is. It's just Menafield is that level of physical specimen. He is that top notch. But I am going to go with Crute by TKO, but in no way will I be surprised if Crute comes out here and gets blown out of the water. In no way do I see that as do I just see this is the point where the wheels are off the wagon, the wood is splintered, it's looking like my childhood wagon that I had from the age of 5, and it was still kicking around, being used to drag stuff around my property at the age of 15, but the bottom was falling out of it. It kind of feels like where we might be with Jimmy Crute, where just physically time might be done with him, which is a shame because he's not old. He's not old. He's not old even by MMA standards. He's only 26 years old. But both of those last 2 fights really have me a little bit worried about it. Not the Hill fight for his chin and the Smith fight for his otherwise durability. But I will take Crute. There is a chance it might be the last time. But I'm picking him by TKO. Seems like that's the popular bet. Crute is a minus 177 to minus 200 favorite. Menafield plus 140 to plus 163. It's going to be a fun mess. Tyson Pedro versus Modestas Bukauskas. Another one of the 205 Aussies. Tyson Pedro took 4 years off of fighting. Same height, 1 inch in advantage. I still have questions about Pedro because coming back and beating Harry Hunsucker, who is playing a big role on this card, and Ike Villanueva doesn't really tell me much just because they are not good. they are notably not UFC caliber. And I think Bukowskis is. He's not some great unsung talent. He's a, tall enough guy with a good enough range advantage and some creative striking. Not a bad wrestler necessarily, not a bad grappler necessarily. Kind of has that well-rounded game, pretty good. I like that he's back in the UFC after getting cut. But I will have to go with Pedro because assuming that Pedro is still more or less the guy before his layoff, the same guy, he's just better. He's got more physicality than Bukowskis, more power, more explosiveness, faster. He has a better put together striking game. I think it's a striking game that can pressure Bukowskis. He does have options to go for the takedown. He does actually have a pretty good jiu-jitsu game for 205. And that's what I gotta go with. Pedro by TKO. He is the 232 to 280 favorite. And Bukowski's at plus 195 to plus 210. That seems about correct. Josh Kulabau versus Melchik Bagdasaryan. Kulabau is an inch taller, 3 inches longer. I love Josh Kulabau. Seems like a fun dude, is a fun fighter, is one of those guys who, like a Parker Porter, like a... I was going to say, there's got to be someone else on this card that's kind of like this. But no, it's really just kind of like Parker Porter and like Jamie Mularkey later, is a guy who makes the absolute most out of what isn't a particularly high level of physicality. And I am a sucker for those guys. He pushes pace, uses cardio as a weapon, grit, determination, adapts remarkably well. A high fight IQ fighter, in my opinion, mid-fight. And Bagdasaryan hasn't really proven much to me. He's a kickboxer, very good kickboxer, very good striker, but by MMA standards. But he's quite untested. His biggest high water mark is Bruno Souza, and I am just not a big believer in Bruno Souza. Like, I couldn't explain it to you why I'm such a big non-believer in Bruno Souza, realistically speaking. But there's just something about him that triggers something in my brain to say just isn't really that good. It doesn't have that dog in him. And Kulabau 100% has that dog in him. And Bagdasaryan is not like an Alex Pereira. He's not a big finisher. He's not a big monster physically. He doesn't have that give me 2 seconds of your guard being compromised and I will finish you aura. Bagdasaryan kind of needs to go the full 15 minutes. And Kulabau is just totally fine with that, I think. He's going to out-hustle him to a decision, work some grappling in, be good enough on the feet, not to outstrike Bagdasaryan, but be good enough to the feet to make Bagdasaryan have to respect him, and then use the grappling and the wrestling to open up holes for his striking as well and get this job done. And this is an even money fight, minus 105 to minus 115 on Kulabau, minus 105 to minus 120 on Bagdasaryan. I have Kulabau by decision to get the job done. Looking forward to this fight. This is on the undercard. This might be my favorite fight. Clydeson Rodriguez versus Shannon Ross. I'm not sure why Shannon Ross got into the UFC, honestly. Lost on Dana White Contender Series. It's kind of weird that they're signing losers from that program. I get it. He's an Australian. You're trying to fill out also a very small division. This is a flyweight fight. And the small was not meant as a pun, but I'll take it. Pun intended. I mean in terms of bodies. You do need to fill out this division. And if you're going to hire losers from Dana White Contender Series, flyweight is the place to do it. They're the same height. Rodriguez has an extra inch. Rodriguez is a super bright prospect. I mean, he did get knocked down by CJ Vergara. Don't get me wrong. Like, that loss to CJ Vergara hopefully opened his mind to improving some things and gets him a little bit motivated to improve. Because this dude is, to borrow the MMA fighting term, first team off the bus. He's a guy who looks the part of an absolute killer elite prospect and has every physical gift you could ask to do the same thing. He does amazing things. And he's pretty well rounded, actually. Like he actually is a good Muay Thai style kickboxer. He is a good grappler. He has excellent back tape game. He has good ground and pound. He has good scrambling ability. He doesn't, but, again, faded quite badly against CJ Vergara. That's a concern. That's a big, big concern. You'll notice I'm not breaking down Shannon Ross in any way because, to be honest, Shannon Ross is here to lose. He is the jobber, to use a pro wrestling terminology here. I don't think that there's anything about his game that should trouble Rodriguez. He's not super powerful. He's not super athletic. He's not super creative. He's a game guy. He's a tough dude. I think he is one of those not super highly gifted fighters on the physical side who I think does try to be as good as possible. And there's a certain CJ Vergara feel to him, but Vergara at least was, I think, a higher level of athlete and also a guy who did have the right kind of grimy, grinding game to explore Rodriguez's depths and doggedness. I don't think Ross is that guy. So I'm picking Kleitz Rodriguez to finish by TKO. I've heard it said Rodriguez and Rodriguez. That's probably why I'm flipping back and forth. It's probably Rodriguez. But I'm taking him by TKO, although something like a rear naked choke also would not be shocking. Like I said, he does take the back well. He does have a good rear naked choke game. And I don't think Ross is that good of a grappler. So minus 320 to minus 350 favorite on Kleitzen. Plus 250 to plus 270 on Ross. That's actually closer than I expected it to be when I first pulled up the odds. But at the same time, I guess you could argue like Rodriguez was a major, major favorite. Actually, how big of a favorite was he against Vergara? And is this just a bit of a correction? Kleitzen Rodriguez, best fight odds. History, please. There you are. Yeah, I should. Hang on. They're not giving me the. Come on, give me the Vergara. Yeah, he was like a minus. He was as high as a minus 480 against Vergara, and minus 300 against Zarukadashev. So maybe a bit of a correction, but I don't know. Like, I do think Shannon Ross is notably worse than either of those guys. I do. I don't mean to sound super disrespecting of the Turkish Delight, but Shannon Ross is 13-6 on the Australian regional scene and has some losses to some guys that. He lost to Ashtan Mokhtarian. I know it was 2016, but when you are part of the Ashtan Mokhtarian can crushing to get to the UFC agenda, if you don't remember Ashkan Mokhtarian, he got destroyed in his 2-fight run in the UFC. He looked uncompetitive. It's a legitimate question I gotta ask. Anyways. Let's move on to the next fight. Jamie Mullarkey versus Francisco Prado. This is another late notice replacement fight. This was supposed to be Mullarkey versus Nasrat Haqparast, which was a fight that I was actually pretty intrigued by because it would be another one of those like athlete versus guys who does not have a tremendous amount of athleticism, but makes up with it with technique and heart and that dog in him. And that is Jamie Mullarkey. I have not seen too much of Prado. He's 2 inches shorter and has 3 inches less of reach. He does look like a big finisher. He has some cool Taekwondo stuff that he likes to incorporate into his MMA game, but he does feel like a very raw skill set that's not ready for the UFC. He's been fighting like a counter meta game on the Argentinian scene. That works there. I don't think it'll work in the UFC. I don't predict I'll be picking him to win much in the UFC. But you know what? Here's the thing. Let's say that he loses to Jamie Malarkey out here and it's a wake-up call. There is nothing that would stop him from retooling himself and becoming better. Because Francisco Prado is only 20 years old and he is actually a pretty good athlete. But he's not ready for Jamie Malarkey. Malarkey by TKO. Submission's not impossible, actually. Malarkey has like some kind of not bad back takes. We'll go with TKO for Jamie Malarkey. And Malarkey is the minus 260 to minus 290 favorite to Prado's plus 210 to plus 240. That could be wider. Malarkey has actually proven himself to be a UFC caliber lightweight who's done some good things. Yes, he's coming off a robbery decision, in my opinion, against Michael Johnson, but he is a good fighter. Prado is just not ready for this level. Jack Jenkins versus Don Shainis. Jenkins is the taller guy and the longer guy, but it's by an inch both times. And it's not like Don Shainis is not used to fighting guys taller than himself because he's a 5'6" featherweight. Both of these guys feel actually really small for the division, like really short. They're bricked up, but particularly Shainis is bricked up. They do feel like really kind of small just because even though Alexander Volkanovski is like the same height as them, it just feels like they are actually kind of too small and really are bantamweights in disguise. Let me talk about the betting odds here first, because they got Jenkins as a minus 345 to minus 430 favorite, and Shane is coming back at 275 to plus 305. He is a bigger favorite than Kleidson Rodriguez. He is a bigger favorite than Jamie Malarkey. He is a bigger favorite than Tyson Pedro. He is a bigger favorite than almost anyone on this card, except for, I think, Islam Makhachev. Yeah. That's wrong. It's not that I don't see like great potential in Jenkins. I think he's a good athlete. I think he has I think he's adaptable to what an opponent does too, which is nice. When he faced a good kickboxer on Dana White Contender Series, he made it a grappling fight. When he faces good grapplers, he makes it a kickboxing fight. He has that base level game planning fight IQ that I do appreciate and quite often is missing. He has multiple gears as a result of that. He can do different types of fights. Like, there's a lot to like about Jack Jenkins. But are we really like, okay, fine. Don Shainis got melted in 30 seconds by Sadiq Youssef in his debut. He did not look good in any way, shape, or form. He got dominated. But that's Sadiq Youssef. Sadiq Youssef is a beast and a guy who's proven at a very, very high level. Like a guy who arguably had a win over Arnold Allen. Allen got the nod, but there were people scoring that fight for Sadiq Youssef, and it was not the most ridiculous scorecard you're ever going to see. I'm taking Shainis. I think Shainis. So Jenkins has won fights where he's been able to dictate what the type of fight is, where he's been able to essentially kind of bully the opponent by being stronger, by being a compact, bricked up guy with physical attributes to his advantage. Shainis is a even more bricked up dude, even more strong guy. I don't think Jenkins can impose his game on him. Shainis has a good power striking game. He has a good wrestling game. He is a good grappler, despite what the Youssef fight would lead you to believe. Rather fairly, to be honest. I'm picking the upset. I'm picking Shainis to be the first guy that Jenkins has some clinch exchanges with and goes, crap, this guy is actually really, really, really strong and can put me on my back, can put me on the back foot, and can dictate the fight to me. I don't think he'll be like blown out of the water or anything here. I'm picking a decision, but I am legitimately thinking that this is a step up that Jenkins is not quite ready for. And I think people are overlooking at Sheamus's destruction in his UFC debut rather than the body of his work. And also, not for nothing, he has fought in the UFC. Granted, again, for 30 seconds. But he fought in the UFC. He has made that walk. And any kind of jitters that Jenkins is feeling are not there for Sheamus. And also, this is a hometown fight for Jenkins in being an Aussie, fighting in Australia. I got Sheamus. I am, to a degree, hoping that Jenkins proves me wrong here. Because Jenkins, I think, does have the higher ceiling. I like what he can become. Whereas with Sheamus, I kind of think he is what he is going to be, really, for the rest of his career. I think he's at a kind of fun action gatekeeper guy with enough physicality to be a test in the road, a bump in the road, a prospect loss a lot of the time, but no higher. So in a way, I kind of hope I'm wrong, but I do have him taking the win here. Lumalookboome versus Elise Reed, which is basically an atomweight fight, fighting at strawweight. Reed is 2 inches taller, 2.5 inches longer. I'm taking Loma. Reed is predominantly a creative kicker, range fighter, good jab, has good footwork, has a little bit of creativity sparkled in, does her thing, and has surprised me because honestly, I didn't think she would do anything in the UFC, and she has. She legitimately has. She picked up that win over Corey McKenna. That was cool. She beat Melissa Martinez. That's cool. But this feels like kind of a like more along the lines of the Sam Hughes fight, where like you have someone who has good footwork, will probably not let you set the range, despite the fact that you do have a longer range, who has athleticism. Because Lumboom's big limitation is honestly just that she's small, and Reed is not particularly big, not particularly strong, not particularly adept at the clinch. So I see Lumboome probably honestly even being the better range striker, being far better in the clinch. She is a nasty clinch fighter. If your name isn't Angela Hill or Lupita Godinez. I've got Lumboome, and honestly, I think she should be the biggest favorite on the card. And she's minus 275, minus 305. You get Reed at plus 210 to plus 255. That could be wider, honestly. I like Elise Reed. She seems like a lovely lady. I'm rooting for her in almost every fight she has, except against Loma, basically. But I think she's hard capped as to how high she can go. And Loma is just a bad stylistic matchup for her. Blake Builder versus Shane Young. Same height. Young has 4 inches of reach. He is the favorite at minus 135 to minus 150. Builder coming in at plus 110 to plus 120. I think I'm leaning towards Builder, honestly, just because I've seen Shane Young be answered too many times. I've seen fights where Shane Young goes out there against good fighters and fighters with more accomplishments than Builder, to be clear, and just get run out of there. Not killed, not finished, not flash KO'd, not dominated in that way. But just have no answers. Be a little bit too low on the physicality spectrum. Not be able to find his way into pushing a higher pace, outworking them, and getting it done. I just think he's a hard cap fighter. Builder actually is pretty good. He is actually a pretty defensively sound striker, despite being a slow starter. Like, there's a lot of head movement to him. There's quick footwork with his feet, keeps range, always moving, always changing angles, bit of creativity to his striking. He's got power. He can hurt people. He's explosive. He's an opportunistic submission guy with back takes who seems to be actually a pretty competent wrestler as well. My brain says, Shane Young is actually a pretty decent kickboxer and is a well-rounded fighter and has lost to basically very high UFC caliber fighters, way higher than anything Bilder has beaten. But my brain is actually, for a change, for a big change, is actually buying into like a little bit of hype here with Bilder and saying, you know what? Blake Bilder actually is pretty damn good. And I'm picking him by decision because Young is super tough, super durable, super hard to finish. I would bet on him as an underdog. If you're going to bet, plus 110, plus 120, it's not much of an underdog. Not much of an underdog at all, but it's plus odds against Shane Young. I think that's probably something I'm always going to recommend going for. Actually, I forgot earlier when I was talking about Jack Jenkins' favoritism. Zubair Tukhugov, who is in the opening fight of the night, is actually the biggest favorite. He's fighting Elvis Brenner. This is a weird fight because it was listed as a 155-pound fight with Joel Alvarez. And I would assume it had to be 155 because Alvarez is missing 155. There's no way he's going to 145 against Tukhugov. But somehow we've had a late replacement of opponent against a guy who has fought mostly, as far as I could tell, at lightweight. And it's going down to 145. That is, that's a bit bizarre to me. I'm hoping that's a misreport. Hang on. I was looking at Tapology. Let's look real quick at the UFC fight card. Not UFC Fight Pass, just UFC.com, please. Okay. Give me more details. Give me the full card, please. UFC 284 fight card. Tukhugov. Okay, it is a lightweight bout. Okay. So Tapology is just wrong. Okay. That actually alleviates a lot of my thoughts because that was borderline irresponsible. I thought to make him go down a weight class. So Tukhugov is like the poster child for my pet peeves. Dude is a supremely athletic guy. Fast, strong, powerful. He has the right training environment, being a Dagestani guy with the Krepost fight team and with AKA. Perfect gym combination to make a really good fighter. That when he showed up in the UFC, I was like, this guy could be a problem. This guy could be a very good prospect. And number one, he's not really improved at all. And number two, he has the same frustrating thing, which is that he is a super low-paced power striker. The kind of guy that lost a split decision to Hakeem Dawodo and went to a split decision with Felipe Nover and had struggles with Douglas Silva de Andrade, who I really like. I'm a big fan of Douglas Silva de Andrade. I want to make that quite clear. But he's easily a weight class lower and is a weight class bully down lower. Like that was a fight that just stylistically should have been pretty easy for him. So despite the fact that like there's no reason to pick Brenner in this fight. Brenner is a optimistic submission catcher. His stand-up is flashy at times and like kind of like neat, but like structureless and not very good. Like it's going to be shown up in the UFC, I think, a lot. I also, part of my brain just goes like, this is going to be way closer than it actually needs to be because Tukhugov doesn't know how to stamp his authority on a fight, despite, again, having every physical tool and technical tool because he's a good wrestler. He's a good grappler. He's not a bad kickboxer. He just refuses to get it out of first gear. Second gear, maybe tops. I'm picking him to win a decision, but I'm never going to be comfortable picking him. He's a guy who I honestly believe can probably lose to anybody, despite there being no reason for him to do it. If you want to put money on Brenner at plus 400 to plus 450, go ahead. Don't put a lot, but if he pays out, he pays out, because Takugov being the biggest favorite on the card, minus 549 to minus 670. Don't get me wrong, it makes sense, but it also makes no sense at the same time. It makes no sense. Those are your 13 fights on the card. As per usual, I want to point out, like, below this video / podcast, or to the left, to the right, above, you will find a link to my link tree and a link to my Discord. So here's the deal. Here is the deal. The link tree will tell you about my Twitch channel, about my YouTube, about various places you can find the podcast. You can get into my gaming side of me and my MMA side of me in greater detail on the Discord. That is the place to go for the Mixed Martial Arts Simulator, which is a little mix of RPG action with MMA. Enjoy it. Kind of like Dungeons and Dragons meets MMA in a little bit of a way. It's a really, really crude analogy, but a little bit. And you can also find the Pro Wrestling Simulator there, the Slam Ball Simulator there, and a bunch of MMA fans that I think, if you enjoy my conversation here, my podcast, the sound of my voice, and what I say, you will enjoy them as well. So stop on by, have a look, let's have a chat. And otherwise, like, subscribe, comment, do all the things that podcasters and YouTubers want you to do to help them grow their audience and become a bigger thing. So, hey, there you go. Have a good night, or morning, or afternoon, whatever it happens to be, and I will be live tweeting the fights. Assuming that the whole, like, Twitter limited tweets in a day thing doesn't take effect, because I'm not paying for the blue check mark. All right. That's all. Have a good one.